The worst part wasn't what my father said. It was the pause after. That tiny stretch of silence where 50 people in a Manhattan townhouse suddenly didn't know where to look. Glasses half raised. Someone's phone buzzing against the marble bar. I remember that sound more than anything. Just a dull little rattle. My father cleared his throat like he was about to deliver something important. "Logan is the future of this family," Gregory Calloway said, lifting his champagne. "The next man to shape our skyline." Everyone clapped. Of course they did. Logan grinned beside his fiancée Madeline Brooks, tall and confident, the golden sun standing exactly where he believed he belonged. Then my father glanced toward me. "Meanwhile," he added, almost casually, "Sienna chose a simpler path." A few polite laughs drifted around the room. He tilted his glass toward my end of the table. "She teaches children how to hold spoons while the rest of us design skyscrapers." The room laughed harder this time. Not cruel laughter. The kind people use when they don't want to challenge the person holding the money. I kept chewing a piece of bread that suddenly tasted like cardboard. Honestly, if you've ever sat at a table where everyone pretends you're invisible, you know the feeling. I didn't argue. I didn't stand up. I just sat there while the chandelier hummed softly above us and the party kept moving like nothing had happened. Anyway, my name is Sienna Calloway, 28 years old, and the funny thing about that moment, my father thought he was embarrassing me. He had no idea he had just embarrassed himself. Nobody corrected my father. That's how rooms like that work. The person with the most money speaks, and everyone else pretends the words are reasonable. Logan leaned toward me while the applause faded. "You could have dressed a little better tonight," he said under his breath. "It's an engagement party, not a school fundraiser." "I thought it was family," I said. He smiled the way people do when they think they're being patient with someone slower. "It is, but appearances matter." Across the room, my father had already moved on. Gregory Calloway stood beside the investors near the bar, one hand resting on a model of the Hudson Crown Tower. 62 floors, steel and glass. The project he'd been talking about for 2 years. "The skyline's changing," he said proudly. "Hudson Crown will anchor the whole district." Logan joined him like it was the most natural place in the world. "We're finalizing permits next month," he told one of the partners. "The compliance review is already in process." In process. That was closer to the truth than he knew. "Logan," I said quietly when he stepped back toward me. "Do you actually know how those accessibility approvals work?" He waved a hand. "We have consultants for that." "Consultants?" "Right." Madeline came over then, elegant and careful. "Logan says you teach," she said. "Special education." I answered. "That must take patience." Logan laughed softly. "It's a temporary phase." I didn't argue. I just watched my father explain the tower again, watched the investors nod like they were looking at the future, and standing there, I realized something strange. In this family, if you weren't building something tall enough to see from the street, people assumed you weren't building anything at all. That engagement party wasn't the first time I realized how small my place in the family had become. 2 years earlier, I tried something different. I tried being the daughter my father always said he wanted. It was the anniversary of my mother's death. I spent the afternoon cooking the meals she used to make on Sundays. Roast chicken with too much rosemary, potatoes heavy with garlic. By the time the table was set, the whole kitchen smelled like butter and thyme. Logan walked in first, phone pressed to his ear. "The Boston permit's stuck," he was saying. "Tell them the cantilever design needs to change." He passed the dining table without even slowing down. A minute later, my father came in behind him, loosening his tie. "Logan," he said immediately. "The investors called again. They're worried about Hudson Crown." "I know," Logan replied. "Engineering's reviewing the load calculations." They sat down and kept talking. Numbers, materials, deadlines. I waited until the conversation paused. "Dinner's ready," I said. They nodded and started eating. But the conversation kept going like a meeting had simply moved from an office to the kitchen. 10 minutes later, my father finally noticed the candles in the center of the table. "What's the occasion?" he asked. "It's Mom's anniversary," I said quietly. He blinked once, thinking. "Right," he said after a moment. "Of course." Then he reached for his glass. "Sienna," he added, almost as an afterthought, "have you ever considered working at the company, something administrative? Maybe." "You're organized. Administrative." I nodded like it was a reasonable suggestion, even though the chicken on my plate had already gone cold. People in my family like to say Logan built the future of the company. That isn't the whole story. Years ago, when I was still in college, my grandfather asked me to come by his office late one evening. The place smelled faintly of printer ink and old coffee, the way it always did after the staff had gone home. He spread several sets of building plans across his desk. "You're better with systems than your father," he said. "I'm studying education." I reminded him. He waved that away. Education still requires structure. Cities do too. Then he tapped one of the drawings. "Accessibility law is getting stricter every year. Federal codes, state reviews, local inspections, architects miss details, projects stall, and everyone loses money." I looked at the pages, ramps, entrances, elevator clearances, hundreds of small technical notes. "What do you want me to do about it?" I asked. "Build a tool," he said simply. "Something that translates those regulations into clear design checks. Something architects can't ignore." So I did. Over the next year, I built a compliance database that converted accessibility requirements into step-by-step review rules, upload a design plan, and the system flagged conflicts before permits were submitted. My grandfather watched the first full version run on his office computer. "Good," he said quietly. "We'll register it under the Family Design Trust." "Why not the company?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Because Gregory would eventually sell it." The legal papers were filed that winter. The trust held the licensing rights. My name was listed as the developer. After that, the company used the system on nearly every project. Logan usually referred to it as our compliance platform. No one corrected him. Not my father, not the engineers, not the lawyers. And for a long time, neither did I. 3 years ago, the company almost folded. Nobody talks about that part now. But I remember the phone call. My father's voice sounded tight. The way people sound when they're trying not to admit they're scared. "We're in a temporary liquidity issue," he said. Meaning, I asked. "Payroll." He said, 2 weeks. I was standing in my kitchen staring at the mortgage papers on the counter. How much? I asked. 400,000 would stabilize things. Stabilize. That word. I said yes before I thought about it. The bank didn't even hesitate. My mother's land trust held enough value. They approved the refinance in 3 days. $420,000 wired into the company account. When I told my father the transfer went through, he sighed. "You saved us." "Sienna," he said. Logan texted later. "You're a lifesaver." That was it. 6 weeks passed. Then Logan pulled up to Sunday brunch in a brand new black Mercedes. I leaned against the car door. "Nice upgrade," I said. "Executive image," he replied. "With what money?" He shrugged. "Relax. The company's fine." Fine. Nobody mentioned the $420,000 again. Not once. And I let it go. Maybe because I wanted to believe family debts were different. But be honest for a second. When someone thanks you once and never again, was it gratitude or just a receipt? The party moved on after my father's toast. Music started again. Glasses clinked. Conversations filled the room the way they always do when people decide it's easier to ignore an awkward moment than acknowledge it. I was standing near the end of the table when someone stopped beside me. "Excuse me," the man said. "You're Sienna Calloway." "Correct." I turned. Tall, gray hair, careful posture, the kind of calm presence you notice in a crowded room. Before I could answer, Madeline stepped forward. Sienna. This is my father, Andrew Brooks. The name registered immediately. Corporate attorney. His firm handled regulatory work for half the large development projects in the city. I shook his hand. Nice to meet you. Andrew studied my face for a second longer than most people would. Calloway, he repeated thoughtfully. As in the Calloway Design Trust. Logan turned from the bar. Why, he asked. Andrew looked between us. I reviewed a licensing file connected to that trust recently, he said. He simply gave a small nod, the kind lawyers use when they file information away. Then he turned to me again. If you ever have time, he said quietly. I'd be interested in discussing that framework with you. I nodded once. For the first time that evening, someone in the room had spoken to me like I actually existed. 3 days after the party, I sat across from Andrew Brooks in his Midtown office. The room smelled faintly of printer toner and black coffee. He placed a thick folder on the desk between us. Before we discuss anything, he said calmly, I'd like you to review a few documents. I opened the folder. Contracts, licensing records, permit filings tied to the Hudson Crown project. My name appeared throughout the paperwork attached to the compliance system. That part is expected, Andrew said. Your framework is listed as the accessibility review tool for the project. I knew the company was still using it. I replied. He nodded and turned to another page. This is the document that concerns me. I leaned closer. It was a financing record connected to the Hudson Crown construction loan. Collateral listing Hudson Valley Timberland. Appraised value $2,300,000. My mother's land. I felt my stomach tighten. Why is that property connected to this loan, I asked. Andrew answered carefully. Because it was pledged as collateral during the project's financing round. That can't be right, I said immediately. I never approved that. He turned the page toward me. At the bottom was a signature. My name. Sienna Calloway. But the writing was wrong. Too rigid. Too deliberate. Someone had copied the shape of my name without understanding how I actually wrote it. Andrew watched my reaction. Did you authorize this document? He asked. No. He gave a slow nod and closed the folder. Then the situation is serious, he said. Your father used property held under your trust to secure financing for Hudson Crown. He paused for a moment. And legally, he had no authority to pledge it. 2 nights later, someone knocked on my apartment door. Not politely. Hard enough that the sound echoed down the hallway. I opened it and found my father standing there. Gregory Calloway looked different without the careful composure he usually carried. His suit jacket was wrinkled, his expression tight. Logan stood behind him, arms folded. We need to talk, my father said. You already did. I replied. He stepped inside anyway. Logan closed the door behind him. You shut down the compliance system, Logan said immediately. The Hudson Crown review froze this morning. I'm aware. My father stared at me. You had no right to interfere with that project. I shook my head slowly. That system isn't the company's property. Logan took a step forward. Investors are nervous, he said. The permit board flagged the accessibility documentation. We need the framework running again. The framework licensed under my trust, I asked. Neither of them answered. My father's voice lowered. You're damaging the family's reputation. No, I said. I stopped allowing my work to support a loan built on forged paperwork. I walked to the kitchen table and slid Andrew's folder toward them. Logan opened it first. What is this? Look at the last page. He studied the document for several seconds. Then he looked up at our father. Dad, he said slowly, did you sign her name? Gregory's jaw tightened. That property wasn't doing anything. He said, the project needed collateral. My property, I replied. Before the argument could go further, a voice came from the open doorway. Actually, Andrew Brooks said calmly, stepping inside. It was never yours to pledge. My father turned. Andrew placed a hand on the folder. Gregory, he said evenly, This situation has moved beyond a family dispute. He tapped the document once. The signature on this loan instrument appears unauthorized. For the first time in my life, my father had no immediate answer. The collapse didn't happen all at once. That's the strange thing about companies. They don't fall like buildings in movies. They weaken piece by piece. A week after the confrontation at my apartment, Logan called. "You need to fix this," he said the moment I answered. "Fix what? The lenders opened a compliance review," he said sharply. "They're questioning the accessibility certification for Hudson Crown." "They should," I replied. There was a pause. "Sienna," he said more quietly. "Investors are starting to ask questions." "About the collateral?" I asked. "Yes." I could hear him walking across what was probably the marble floor in my father's office. "You understand the scale of this project," Logan continued. "Hudson Crown is valued at $180 million. I know exactly what it is. Then help us resolve this." "I can't resolve a forged document," I said. "Dad created that problem himself." He didn't answer after that. The next call came a few days later. "Madeline." Her voice sounded tired. "My father reviewed the financing documents," she said. "Is it true the land used for collateral wasn't authorized?" "No," I said. "It wasn't." She was quiet for a moment. "I ended the engagement," she said finally. 2 weeks after that, the story reached the press. Calloway Urban Development filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection while the lenders and regulators reviewed the project's financing. Construction on Hudson Crown stopped. Investors disappeared, and eventually the phones at my father's office stopped ringing. When I read the headline on my phone, I expected to feel anger or satisfaction. Instead, there was just silence. Sometimes the end of something loud arrives very quietly. 6 months later, I was standing on a gravel path in the Hudson Valley holding a set of new keys. The building behind me wasn't tall, just 2 floors, clean lines, wide hallways. Nothing like the towers my family used to brag about. Andrew Brooks walked up beside me. "So," he said, looking at the entrance, "this is where the money went." "Most of it," I said. $2,900,000 from the legal settlement. Not penthouses, not investments, classrooms. Inside, a teacher named Maria was setting up tables for the first group of students. Kids who needed quiet spaces, wide doors, places where nobody laughed at them for learning slower than everyone else. Andrew nodded toward the building. "You know," he said, "your father spent 30 years trying to build something people could see from across the city." "Yeah," I said. "And you built something people have to walk inside to understand." I leaned against the railing. "I think that's the difference," I said. Maria called from the doorway. "Sienna, the parents are arriving." "I'm coming," I said, before I walked in. Andrew said one more thing. "Most people would have taken the money and disappeared." "Maybe," I said, but disappearing was never really the problem. Here's the truth, though. If you've ever been the quiet one in your own family, the one nobody expects anything from, sometimes the best thing you can do isn't prove them wrong. Sometimes you just build something better and let it speak for you. Anyway, that's my story. If you've ever had to walk away from the people who underestimated you, I'd honestly like to hear how it turned out for you too.